Sup everybody, this is Karak with ACG, and as always it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. And that review today comes for a title that joins the Coven-like collection of other games such as Limbo, Typo Man, and Inside, and even more in this mini-genre of washed-out loose narrative mystery platformers. This game is Little Nightmares. It's out on the 27th for $19.99 on Steam, PS4, and Xbox One. Let's see how it did, shall we? As always, if you liked the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Little Nightmares. Behind the scenes at an Albertsons meat market, Thanksgiving at the Karaks, and finally finding out where all of those Air Jordan Retro Oreos went to. Graphics are up first. You know, I can say this. This game is really, at any time, no damn slouch. 1080p, 30 FPS on the PS4, 1620p at a somewhat stable 60 FPS on the PS4 Pro, and what looks like about 900p and 30 FPS on the Xbox One. But of course, none of that is going to match up to the PC, and I was quite surprised. Easily 4K at a rock-solid 60 FPS, even on a 1070 with a somewhat newer i7. Now regardless though, the combination of really absolutely wicked location design mixed with this subtle use of both real and false locations marking safety means that throughout this title, there's a stealth game that plays like a platformer and not the other way around, and it's something you notice right away with the level design. And it's mixed with incredible lighting. The detail's just phenomenal, from long throw shadows flickering in the solitary light of your little rip-off Bic lighter, to this golden hue that sort of comes in from outdoors trying to fight through nasty smudge-stained windows. It is just phenomenal color use, and while games of this genre have always been about washing out or picking primary colors or something in between for their art style, for the most part, Little Nightmares goes for an excellent in-between itself that allows for the lighting engine to also show some of the excellent texture work without sort of drawing your eye away just due to flashy colors or the lack of them. Also, I have to say, modeling of the character, good and bad, is just insane. I mean, this is the first time where we figure out that apparently Chef Boyardee works on the world's worst cruise ship and absolutely friggin' let himself go. Or the moment a massive, giant, fatty cell of an enemy grabs you and snorts and basically swallows their own hand in their haste to see if it's possible to throw you through their body and right out the other end. Just excellent weight and feel and animation to almost everything here. Now that doesn't mean it's all perfect. There are a number of low detail textures right next to the really awesome ones, and it's in many places, and there's a couple times where the locations were a little bit troublesome to negotiate, especially with this camera system. Overall though, I have to say this. The game through and through looked amazing. It performed better than I ever thought it was actually going to, and in the end, I really liked the design work. Sound, music, and voice. And of course, when it comes to audio, sound's going to be up first. It is great stuff. Not only is it laced with just the right amount of post-processing so that the tonal qualities of different enemies' labored breathing is slightly altered when in, say, a kitchen versus chasing you down a hall, but it's also in the variety of ambient sounds. The game absolutely hinges on the ambient sound layer to be a soundtrack here, from the rattle of dishes and soapy water being washed by your enemies, to the slough of discarded shoes in massive waste bins that really do nothing to ease the feeling that you are seeing absolute genocide. Really great sound work throughout. Music. Yeah, so there's barely any here. There's this ambient layer that you can pick up some of the time, but it's usually just going in between and above and below the layered sound work I talked about a second ago. Now, the few times it does creep up, it's when you're being chased or searched for, and it's this deep, somber, almost Jaws-like track that I adore and totally added tension to all of the moments. Would I have liked more? Maybe, but this is one of the rare times when we see a real effort in melding the two areas, sound and music, and effectively using one for the other, and I have to applaud them for that because, well, here, for the most part, it actually worked. Voice. Okay, so this is grunts and groans only, but that being said, the first time you hear the labored breathing of the obese first cousin of the Swedish chef from Sesame Street tear assing after you because you knocked over a bottle, it's actually hard not to be just a little bit impressed. And the use of voice to make sounds versus words tells the story in a bit of a different way, but it tells it well enough that you can identify with what's happening on screen at any one time. So I liked it even though it's not necessarily normal or typical voice work. Gameplay. While the story might be complex, the gameplay isn't, and so from the beginning to its very end, Little Nightmares does one thing and it does it well. It allows you to progress with very little backtracking for the most part across a massive location as you try to find out why the little girl you're playing and apparently another race of dunce cap wearing gnomes are getting eaten like a goddamn McDonald's just moved into town and they're short on any McRibs. You run, jump, slide, shimmy, and stealth your way through the levels as room after room after room after room is opened before you, and you have to find the proper way through. Now really, especially recently, we've seen these games come up before, and they always require a resonance in their gameplay, where even if form and function are a mystery at any one time, it sort of feels interwoven into the game world's fiction, and so you continue to play to find out what's going on. The problem I had with Little Nightmares is that for a good deal of the time, the gameplay was just shallow enough that the mystery in and of itself had to hold my interest, especially when rote became routine about halfway through and the gameplay got a little bit stale. Now that doesn't mean it's all bad. I mean, it's absolutely terrifying at times. The first time you end up facing an enemy that looks like the third brother from the movie Twins, Crimple Raisin, who somehow got Danny DeVito's legs and Arnold Schwarzenegger's torso, got them sewn together, and they end up hobble humping across the scenery to try to catch you. It is this cool mixture of comedic horror that actually starts to creep up, and I wasn't really expecting that. Or just how some of the rooms were surprising. One time I walked into a room and realized this is the world where apparently little kids make the best burritos ever. It's like a damned Vice episode about Taco Bell. Now the issue here is that even at its most complex, for the majority, Little Nightmares is insanely easy with no real difficulty to speak of. Mix that with its fairly pedestrian puzzle work, and that means that you do get to explore a fantastic looking set of locations, and a ton of them. Room after room after room blazes past you, and it all becomes sort of a blur, and they're just really nothing more than window dressing. Now, that'd be totally fine if there was a heightened difficulty, but without that balance, even death isn't much more of a nuisance just waiting for loading. Luckily, control is pretty spot on here, though it's not perfect, and besides jumping and climbing, you can push and pull objects to interact with the game world, find secrets, and sort of uncover even more about what might be going on in this title. And of course, that brings us to fun factor. For much of the time, I had a goddamn blast. There are some later puzzles that are so fun to do, or to just mess around with the enemies in some rooms, and while the narrative never is really told outright to you, it's interesting enough to sort of just make you want to continue to see the world. Unfortunately, there was some time in here where I was really wishing for a bit of it to be a more taxing, and the game's 6 to 8 hour time frame for many of us is going to feel a little bit short. Now, platformers have you running left to right, like you're reading a book of the world. Every jump's a word, every ladder's a sentence, but it has to all come together, it has to flow, and thus your levels are made. And here, the desire to minimalize puzzle work hasn't resulted in the excellence that most felt with, let's say, the game Inside. But it hasn't resulted in something poor either. It's just something that feels a little bit like a bunch of untapped potential within something that's actually quite enjoyable all by itself. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for a sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale. This is actually a wait for a sale. One is because plain and simple, it is just a fairly short game for this price. Two, there is not a lot of difficulty here at all. Now, that doesn't mean this can't be an experience game, and I certainly see a lot of folks out there jumping at the chance to play this title and not in any way, shape, or form being unhappy with it. But me personally, I just don't feel comfortable saying, hey, this is something you should instantly go out and get without knowing much more about the person who's going to do so. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Maybe check out Twitter or Patreon. That's how I continue to give you these reviews. If you dislike it, give it a thumbs down. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.